Hey guys, I'm coming on here tonight to post a video to talk about our story with biomedical treatment, and then give you guys the basics about biomedical treatment. I have to be kind of quiet because my girls are asleep just down the hall, and I look kind of like yarn because, well, I just got out of the shower and I don't know. Anyways, so I have written down several things here that I wanted to for sure cover. I just want to cover the basics. That way I can give you guys the tools you need if you want to do biomedical treatment with your child, and you can take it from there. I do want to disclose that this is not medical advice. This is for educational purposes only. So you could take that with a grain of salt. Do what you will. Legally, I have to disclose that to protect myself. For those of you who don't know, I actually graduated earlier this year with my holistic health practitioner certification. I have not gotten the opportunity to begin really a career with that. And before my post about Amelia being recovered, no one here was really interested in this area, so I didn't think holistic health was going to be realistic here. But as far as, working with clients go, I have a couple right now, but I cannot take on an entire caseload of clients. So I'm going to give you guys a really great physician to see if you're interested. Maybe in the future when things kind of settle down in life, I will be able to pursue it a little bit more. I just can't right now because our schedule is so crazy, and I'm here alone with the girls all the time, and then I work full time, and so I don't have the time to do that right now. Of course, anytime anyone messages me, I really try to help them the best I can and guide them, but as far as like taking on a client's full-on treatment, I just really cannot do that right now. So let's just jump into it. This video is going to be pretty lengthy. I apologize. It just is. We're going to try to cover all the basics, and I'm not going to go into every single detail just because it is impossible in one video. So I'm going to tell you guys our complete story from birth until now with Amelia. So when Amelia was born, I was on the allopathic side of things. And for those who don't know what allopathic means, it just means mainstream medicine, big pharma, the doctors that you see every day here. That is allopathic medicine, and what we are doing is holistic health, which is, natural things, natural supplements, diet and lifestyle changes. And so anyways, I was on the allopathic side of things. I had no medical experience with anything. I just chose to blindly trust my daughter's pediatrician because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. And I thought my mom intuition did not matter, because these people went to school and got a degree, so what's it matter what I think? They're the professionals. But I do just want to say that you are the parent, and you know your child much better than any of these professionals ever could. You are with them 24/7, and if you have a gut feeling, just go with it, because 9 times out of 10, your intuition is right. And, we're blindly trusting strangers to tell us what is best for our children. So anyways, Amelia had her vaccines at birth, which were the hepatitis B vaccine, and then I think the vitamin K. It was a healthy labor, birth, no complications. Amelia was 7 pounds and 10 ounces. She was a healthy baby. She was perfect. Fast forward to 2 months, she had her first round of vaccinations, and then 4 months, and then 6 months. And then at 10 months, she had the flu shots that come in like 2 doses. So they give like the first dose and then the second dose like 2 weeks later. Sorry, my brain is scrambled. So at the 10-month flu shot, this was the one where we seen the first regression. There were 2 regressions. This first regression was mild. And this was where the autism popped into my head. So up until this point, Amelia was developing normally. And if you go back through my Facebook, you can see that I had posted videos of Amelia. She had learned to shake her head and say no. She was waving. She had started walking at this point. She was completely normal and she was advanced for her age. And then she takes this flu shot and she got a fever after, which was pretty typical for her. She always got fevers after vaccinations. That's just a side effect because your immune system is kind of going a little bit crazy. But she got this fever, so I didn't think anything of it because she always got fevers with the vaccines. And then the day after, I had my friend had come over, and I had been with Amelia by myself for like the longest time because my husband was working away. And she was like, why don't you go out and like have a break? So I went out to get my nails done and do a little bit of shopping. And I wasn't far away. I was just here in town. And she called me like 15 minutes after I had left. Now, whenever I left, Amelia was in the crib in her room asleep. So she hadn't actually seen her yet. So she called me and she was like, Lakin, there's something wrong with Amelia. She's covered from head to toe in these little dots that look like chickenpox. And so I come home, and sure enough, she has this really, really, really bad rash. Like little tiny circle dots all over her body. And I mean, it was so bad. It was so red and inflamed. It was not there that morning. This was like the day or 2 after she had had her flu vaccine. She still had the fever. And so I took her to the pediatrician, and they diagnosed it as eczema. It was not eczema, by the way. Because it was like little dots everywhere all over her body. It was just some kind of rash, a reaction to the vaccine. And so, that fever ended up lasting for like 2 weeks. And I kept taking her to the pediatrician because she couldn't kick the fever. And they kept saying, it's okay, like it's normal, blah, blah, blah. That's not normal for a fever to last 2 weeks after vaccines. But anyways, so I went on to give her, the regression part. So this was in October of 2019. And I remember I went to my mother-in-law's house, and it was around Halloween time. Because I can remember the day that it happened. Amelia had a Halloween outfit on, and I was sitting in the rocking chair, and Amelia and her cousin were playing, and I remember she was doing something she wasn't supposed to, and I was trying to grab her attention, so I said, Amelia, and she didn't respond. And so I continued to say it, and she continued to not respond. It was almost like she was deaf, and I was trying not to get too overwhelmed because she was really hyper at that time, and she was like running around playing with her. And then so that as the next couple of days went on, she continued to not respond to her name. Now at this point, she still had eye contact, and she was still saying words like mama, dada, kitty, bye. She was still shaking her head no. She was still happy and let me hold her and all that stuff. And the only thing she had lost in this regression was responding to her name. So at this point, I'd taken her to the ENT to have a hearing test done, which came back perfect, you know. And so I go home and I go on Google and I type in, my baby is not responding to her name anymore. And every single like result that popped up said autism, early signs of autism, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh. And so like I got this gut feeling that was just like bad. But she was still really young. She was 10 months old, and I thought, okay, maybe it's just a phase, like, I don't know. So fast forward to 12 months old, she had her 12-month vaccines. And at this point, autism was still on my mind. It was in the back of my mind because she was still not responding to her name at this point. And so I remember texting Charlie. He was in Texas. And I was like, I think Amelia could have autism. I said, because she's not responding to her name anymore. He was like, don't say that. Like, don't say that. She's so little. And so I was like, yeah, I mean, she doesn't have any other symptoms. It's just this. So we went on to 12 months and vaccinated her. And this was right as I was about to have Junie. Literally, I was right about to pop. And so Amelia had these vaccines, got her fever as usual. And then the next day, this was right as soon as she turned a year old. It was Christmas time. The next day, I had noticed that Amelia had started to twirl her wrist a lot. And at first I thought, okay, she's waving. And then it got to where she started to walk on her tiptoes. And then she started to become fixated on strings, like yarn and belts and things like that. And she would like flip them around in front of her face, and she would make her vocal stem noise. And you know, at that point we were kind of like, okay, what's going on? And I was telling Charlie, I was like, okay, I think she's got autism. Like, this is it. This is all the signs. And they've come, and this is it. And so he was like, no, let's just get her into the pediatrician and see what they say. And, you know, we tried to talk ourselves down, like, oh, this ain't autism. Like, she was fine. She was fine. She can talk, blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden she couldn't anymore. She didn't say any words. And she stopped making eye contact. And as the days went on, the eye contact got worse and worse and worse, to the point where she would not look at us at all, no matter what we did. And I remember, like, saying a little phrase that would always get her to look at me, and it was, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your long hair. And when I would say that, she would look at me every time, but that was it. Other than that, she would not look at me. And then she started to get really irritable and whiny. She would not let me hold her anymore, and she was the most spoiled, attached to my hip baby ever. And so when I would try to pick her up, she would fight me and, like, try to throw herself on the floor and scream. And at this point, we went back to the NT for another hearing test, which was still perfect. And so at this point, I just knew, but I was really trying to talk myself down. And I was kind of in it by myself at this point, because everyone else was like, oh, she's so little, she's so young. So I took her to the pediatrician, and we had the best pediatrician at this time. This was a different pediatrician than the one Amelia normally seen when she had vaccines and everything like that. And this pediatrician, she, I came in with a big, like, notebook full, like a notebook sheet full of everything that was going on and everything I thought that could have caused it, like too much screen time, just a bunch of environmental factors I had written down. And I remember going in there, and she was like, okay, you know, she's only 12 months old. She said, but we'll go ahead and give her this test. And I can't remember what it's called. It's that little checklist they do at like 14 months to check to make sure that your child isn't showing any signs for autism. And by the test score, she was definitely showing the signs for autism. And I told the pediatrician, I was like, I'm pretty positive, like, that this is autism, that she's regressed in autism. I was like, I need to get her a referral ASAP to UK so that she can become diagnosed and we could start therapy. And so we started therapy with First Steps, and then we were doing occupational therapy and speech therapy at outpatient at Pikeville. And then I had heard of ABA therapy and how it was a game changer and everything. So I was like, okay, I need to get her into ABA therapy. But she had to have a diagnosis. And so that's why I fought so hard to try to give the diagnosis as quick as possible. Now, another thing I want to talk about within the first year of her life is that she had recurrent ear infections, which is something we see a ton in children with autism, is recurrent ear infections. But the only symptoms she ever had was she would wake up all the time with an extremely high fever. And so I would take her to the pediatrician. She'd have like a fever of 104, 105. No other symptoms, no pulling out her ears, nothing. And this pediatrician would say, oh, her ear's red. Let's give her some antibiotics. She has an ear infection. And so Amelia was diagnosed with 13 ear infections, which were treated with 13 rounds of penicillin under 12 months old. That's ridiculous and crazy. And I swear I didn't know any better. I wished I would have. And so we took her for tubes shortly after 12 months old back to the ENT. And the ENT said, you know, she's not a candidate for tubes. She has no scarring. She has no fluid. Her ears look perfect. It looks like she's never even had an ear infection. And so when we seen our first biomedical physician, they told us that that these these fevers were not actually ear infections, that they were her immune system, just going havoc from all the vaccines. And another thing is that I took Amelia for vaccines probably 3 or 4 times while she was sick with the fever. And that's like a big no-no. And I mean, a lot of other people tell me that their pediatricians will not do vaccines while their children are sick, but ours did. And they told us that it was not a big deal. It was not going to do anything. But here's the thing. Your kid has a fever, their immune system's already fighting really hard, and then you throw in a vaccine and it just wreaks havoc on the immune system. And immune system damage and issues they play a big part in autism. And so, all these puzzle pieces started to come together at this point, but I still had not discovered biomedical therapy, or biomedical treatment, sorry. And so, we were just shocked that she wasn't a candidate for tubes. And when we actually got our new pediatrician, they had told us, after I told her about all those antibiotics and how I was very nervous and scared to give her any more, she had told us that kids' ears are red for many reasons, whether it be crying or teething or a viral cold. I mean, there's just so many reasons that their ears are red. And so with that comes a lot of ear infections misdiagnosed. That's one of the most commonly diagnosed illnesses in children. And the majority of the time, they do not even have an ear infection. Their ear is just red. If it were an actual infection, you would see the fluid. I mean, all of that. But they solely diagnose on a red ear. And this is not, to jab at any and all pediatricians. This is just, a lot of pediatricians do this. It's just the truth. It is what it is. And so, Amelia got into UK developmental peds at 17 months old. And that's when she got the diagnosis, a month before, a year and a half. And then a month later, she began ABA therapy at the Ava Center in Pikeville. And she attended therapy for nearly 2 years. And at this point, I think it was about 6 months in to ABA therapy before we started to see any progress at all. And the progress that we did see was very, very slow and smaller things. And I don't want to say that they're small things because, everything is a big thing in the autism community because, we work so hard to get those milestones. But it was things like learning how to eat with a spoon, to suck from a straw, to scribble with a crayon. And I don't mean like to actually draw lines or anything. I mean, just to be able to actually hold the crayon and scribble. It was little things like that. And then fast forward to several months later, I had discovered biomedical treatment from a friend who lives in Indiana. And I had actually met her on an autism mom support group. She was like, you need to read this book. She said it's changed our lives, like my views on everything. And I said, okay. And so I read this book. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I can't remember what it was called, but I'm going to link it for you guys. And she said, and there's this group on Facebook that is based on the book. And so I found the group, and it's called Health and Hope for Autism. And as I went down the group, because I hadn't ordered the book yet, I went on the group first. And as I went down through the group, I couldn't understand anything anybody was talking about. Everything was like, what do I do on this round? Like CoQ10 and like all kinds of like stuff that my brain just did not understand. I just didn't understand it. And so I was like, okay, I need to buy the book and read it because I have no idea what anyone here is talking about. And so I ordered the book, and while Amelia was in therapy every day, I would go down to the park across the road and read the book. I read the book in probably 3 days, and then I went on Amazon to look for more books about autism recovery and biomedical treatment. And so I found this book by Jenny McCarthy, and I can't remember what it's called either because she has several. And so I read the book by Jenny McCarthy, and that one was a true game changer for me because it was her story with her son Evan, who had autism and was recovered through biomedical treatment with Dr. Derry Cartznell from Orlando, Florida. And so at this point, I kept ordering books, and I kept reading that park every day. And I started to do some research. And the more research I'd done, and the more books I read, and the more articles and charts I seen, I was like, okay, this is like as basic common sense as it gets. Like this all makes so much sense. This is all describes my child and so many other children I know, and it just makes sense. And I do want to say, after Amelia's 12-month vaccines, that was her last round of vaccines. Because after she regressed into autism, at this point, I still did not know if vaccines played a part, and I was still iffy. But my gut was telling me, do not do this, just in case all them moms out there who are saying vaccines cause autism were telling the truth. And so I didn't do it anymore after that. And Jeannie was born shortly after she regressed, and I never have given her a single vaccine. Thank God I never did. And so after I read these biomedical books, I was like, okay, I've got to book an appointment with a biomedical physician. And so I did with a couple of different ones. And the price is very expensive. The first appointment, the consult, is usually about an hour and a half. And some of them were $5.50 an hour. Some were $7.50 an hour. It was crazy. And just so you guys know, insurance does not cover anything biomedical or holistic health. Ridiculous, but that's just how it is. And so this was paid out of pocket. And so the first treatment that we worked on with Amelia was a yeast treatment. Because Amelia was on 13 rounds of antibiotics under a year old, those antibiotics build a lot of yeast in the gut. And they strip the gut of good bacteria, along with the bad bacteria. So there's nothing fighting, for anything good for your gut. And then they also kind of they cause what is called leaky gut syndrome. Leaky gut syndrome is when there are little tiny holes in the gut, in the intestinal lining, almost like a sponge with little tiny holes. And so through leaky gut syndrome, the foods that our children eat and the chemicals that they ingest from these foods, like pesticides and glyphosate from foods that are not organic, from foods with dyes, and just foods with lots of processed and packaged foods that are really not good for you. All those chemicals and bad things from those foods are able to escape through those holes into the bloodstream, and they go straight to the brain. And that's why it's so important to eat organic. And I'm not trying to sound like a Karen, and my kids do not eat organic all the time, I promise you. My Amelia is a very picky eater, so to get her to eat much, is just a miracle on its own. But we'll talk about diet a little bit later. Anyways, so Amelia also had the leaky gut syndrome, and we had a major overload of yeast. And at this point, Amelia had developed eczema. And I see a lot of our children on Facebook with eczema, and I just want to tell you guys, eczema, you can use all the steroid creams you want, all the oatmeal baths and the lotions. It will come back always. It will always come back until you treat the root cause, which is gut health, which is yeast and just poor gut health. And so we started what was called 3-Lac. It was a probiotic for yeast, and it was the one Jenny McCarthy had talked about in her book. And when we started that for Amelia, probably about 2 weeks in, she started excreting diapers full of yeast. And that sounds really gross, but this is what it is. So in her diapers were a lot of mucus in her stool. It looked like slime, and that is yeast excreting from the body. She had several diapers full, and she was done with it. And so her eczema had went away. And I was like, okay, we've cured the yeast, but her autism is still not cured. And so we went on to do, and at this point, I was going to tell you guys, her ATEC before we started any of this was 68. And the ATEC is on a score of 0 to 180. It's a test you take, and you answer questions about your child. And 180 is like the most severe, autism. And then 10 and under is technically recovered. Your child no longer meets the criteria for the autism diagnosis. This does not mean they won't have a couple of little things left to work on, some quirks, but they will not meet the criteria for the diagnosis any longer. And so we were at a 68. And this was after, like I said, nearly 2 years of ABA therapy. And so I started to read more and more and follow biomedical physicians, and I learned that household and hygiene toxins played a huge role because, your skin is the biggest organ on your body. And so I was like, well, we have to remove all of those. So I started washing my clothes in vinegar and baking soda. And that's what I started to clean with. And I started to use Castile soap for shampoo and body wash. And Castile soap can be used for like everything. So that's what it was. And so I did that, and we continued with probiotics, and we started with some basic supplements like adrenal supports and probiotics and cod liver oil, and there was a couple more I can't remember. There was leafy prana for inflammation, and on balm gut support, which was really good. And at this point, I was mostly just trying to heal Amelia's gut, because when I had read the books from Dr. Cartsinell and Jenny McCarthy, that's what they did. And so we did some methyl B12 and some stuff like that from our first doctor. And, things improved. Amelia went to a 46 or 48 when I have it in my post on the ATEC scale. And so I was like, okay, we've made tremendous progress with this. And then I discovered the best holistic health practitioner ever, Becky Davila. And she has been Amelia's holistic health practitioner ever since then. Also, we did the gluten and dairy-free diet for a while because, let me go ahead and jump into that part. The gluten and dairy-free diet is usually good for children with autism. Not always. All of our children are different. So some kids may need a GAPS diet. Some kids may need, what's it called? There are different diets. There are so many different diets you'll have to look into. But the gluten and dairy-free diet was like one of the main ones that everyone was bragging about on the page. And so we gave it a try, and it was not easy. It took a lot of learning and reading labels at the grocery store. And so when we removed gluten and dairy, Amelia's stimming immediately stopped, like 2 days in. And so she was on this diet for 2 or 3 months. And the entire time she did not stim at all. And also back then, Amelia was bad to have meltdowns and tantrums. Those also completely stopped. And so it got to a point where she started to get very, very picky. Like to the point where she would not eat anything. So we had to stop the diet because it's more important that my child eats than to be on a diet. And I still from that point on tried to buy everything organic and dye-free and tried to get it as fresh as possible, with what I could with kid snacks. It's not easy. And so, the day, it was on a Saturday, literally the day we gave her back gluten and dairy, she immediately started stimming again. And that just blows my mind, because it worked so well for her stimming. Other than that, we did not see any gains in speech or anything from it. So from that point on, we have stuck with the organic, no dyes, no preservatives, that kind of thing. And so I met Becky. I booked an appointment with her. And from the get-go, she had wanted to do chelation. And at this point, I had read about chelation. Obviously, I'd heard about it, and it kind of scared me. Because I was like, this seems like a really big deal. This seems like a really big thing, and it's scary, and I don't know the side effects. And people in the group were always just saying so many different things about it. So it just scared me, and it was not something that I had planned on doing, and I was going to save as a last resort. And it turns out that it did end up being my last resort because it worked so well. And so, we started the chelation, and before you can start chelation, you have to do 2 weeks worth of what's called the Core 4, which is magnesium, zinc, vitamin E, and vitamin C. And then it's also recommended that you do adrenal supports, because if not, you will experience really bad adrenal fatigue. And then liver support, like milk thistle, because your body is detoxing, you need some liver support. I'm trying to think of what else it was. We've been through so many supplements, you guys. I can't remember what else it was, but there was something else. So we started that 2 weeks prior to starting chelation. And then we started the chelation. And we seen gains from round 1. On round 1, I'd say on the last day of round 1, day 3, Amelia had started to say sentences. Now, I want to disclose, sorry, I thought I heard one of the girls waking up. I want to disclose that not everyone is going to have gains from the very start. Some people, it may take weeks before they start to see gains. And on chelation, you will go and have some weeks where you have no gains at all. You will have, times where you plateau and there's no progress, there's no regression, and then you'll all of a sudden get like a magical round where your child just starts to talk up a storm, blah, blah, blah. Chelation is not the answer for everyone. Some of our kids actually do not have heavy metal damage, because autism is not just, vaccine injury. That plays a really big part. But you also have things like yeast and parasites and mold exposure and, mold toxicity, and just really bad gut health and immune issues and mitochondrial issues. And there's just so much to address with biomedical treatment. And so Amelia had gains from the beginning. And there were weeks, the first couple of weeks it went on slow. And Becky was like, try this for 10 weeks. And she was like, if you see no progress, then we will move on to another treatment. She said, but just give it 10 weeks. And so by 10 weeks, I was already in awe of this, because she had made a lot of progress in this amount of time. This was halfway into where we are now. Well, we just actually started round 21 today. But Amelia, we started, I think when we got up in the teens somewhere, Amelia we started to have really magical rounds. Like rounds where like on day 2 of round, she was talking our heads off. And I remember one night she was just like, she started to ask us questions and having conversations with Charlie. And I mean, the most random things that I would have never dreamed of her saying anytime soon. She was like, Daddy, what's a forest? And she was like, Mommy, what's your name? And I mean, just craziness, And so we continued with it. And I had taken her ATEC a couple times, and it was dropping and dropping and dropping. We were seeing like 24, 16, 14. And then, I took her ATEC again, and her score was a 10. And then I took it 2 days later after she was potty trained, because we got her potty trained just a couple days ago. And potty training counts for a lot of points on the ATEC at her age. The ATEC will go, according to your child's age. And Amelia is 3.5. And so after I got potty trained, her ATEC dropped to an 8. And so I had told Becky, I was like, Becky, look at her ATEC. It's an 8. And Becky's like, oh my gosh, she's recovered. And I was like I was in shock. I was like, oh my gosh. And at this point I knew, Amelia has been reading sight words. And she's reading this little tiny book we have at home. It's a sight word book, and it's called Super Skunk. And like, what 3.5-year-old can read? I know that that's like one of those artistic things that you get with children with autism. They have super smart, genius abilities at very young ages. But I mean, Amelia's communication has came so far. And just from last year in preschool, her teachers and everybody are amazed. And her speech therapist actually told me that she was having a hard time this year trying to find curriculum for Amelia that was challenging, because Amelia just knew so much. And Amelia is talking up a storm now. She asks questions, and she says sentences, and she tells us what she wants and needs. And she's verbal, and she is thriving. She is smart. Those 8 points left are some ADHD, and it's not like severe ADHD. It's like at home and anywhere else besides school, she is fine. And I'm not sure if it's just because at school there's so many cool things, toys and colors and music, and she gets very excited. She loves school so much. So at school she has trouble sitting, and that's really just the biggest problem with the ADHD. At home she's fine. When we go to our parents' house, she's fine. She cannot sit down at school. I mean, she can, if we tell her, Amelia, sit down on the rug, she'll sit down for a minute or two, and then she's back up, pacing the floors. So, the hyperactivity, that is still something that we are working on. And then, she has this one stem left where she makes this little noise and like sings a little tune to these little tiny dolls. And honestly, I think it's just a habit at this point, because she has done it for years. And it was like one of her most commonly used stems. So at this point, I think it's just a habit. And it's just breaking that habit of doing that. Because she doesn't really have sensory issues. She's not overwhelmed by loud noises or crowds. So I think it's just genuinely a habit. But we are going to do a new yeast protocol, because stemming normally comes from yeast. We're going to do some tests and see kind of what's going on, and address that. And honestly, if someone were to observe Amelia at school, if it weren't for her not being able to sit for long periods of time, or her little stem that she still does sometimes, you wouldn't be able to tell her apart from her typical peers. And so, we still have to make an appointment with UK pediatric developmental specialist to have the ADOS test repeated to officially lose the diagnosis on paper. And then, we have to address the residual ADHD and stuff. But other than that, Amelia is recovered. At this point, she would no longer qualify for a diagnosis of autism. And it happened, in the thick of it. It was like, this is taking forever. I wonder how many rounds we have left to go. And then I look back now and I'm like, wow, because just in the past couple of weeks, like just the past month, she has lost most of those points on the ATEC because she has progressed so much. So the further we got into chelation, the better it worked. And I'm still doing it because, I think once your child is recovered, it's really up to you whether you want to stop it or not. And I think every parent will know when they need to stop if they choose to do that. You will know when the time is right to stop. And I just don't feel like the time is right just yet. And also on Amelia's metals testing we had done, when we first had it done, her mercury was like 34%. Aluminum was 97%. And then there was some other ones, I can't remember what they were called. Thorium or something like that was high. And so as we did chelation and we redid the metals test, her metals levels were going down. She was making progress. And so it was just like proof that as we excreted those heavy metals from her brain, the progress came, and, she was ultimately recovered and healed from autism. And so, chelation, there are different chelators you can use. The one we use is called alpha lipoic acid. You can literally go to Walmart right now and buy it over the counter. I don't recommend to do that because we want good bioavailable supplements that the body's actually going to absorb and use, instead of, some of these cheaper ones and the ones that are easily accessible are not as great. They're not absorbed by the body because they're filled with so many fake forms of vitamins and stuff. So you want to find supplements that are bioavailable. And so we give Amelia, let me explain the rounds. And I'm sorry that this video has been kind of like, I have a lot of scatterbrain, but it's just mom brain. But the way rounds work is it's 72 hours on round, 72 hours off. So when you are on round, you are chelating. You are using whichever chelator, and almost everyone will use alpha lipoic acid because it's the only chelator that crosses the blood-brain barrier to pull metals from the brain. The other chelators do not cross that blood-brain barrier, so they don't get from your brain. They just pull metals from the body. The brain is where we want to be at, so you will almost always be on ALA, alpha lipoic acid. And so Amelia started out with a very small dose every 3 hours for 72 hours. So our previous schedule when we first started, was we would start on Thursday evenings at 5 p.m. and we would end round on Sundays at, let me look at this schedule, on Sundays at 4 p.m. This was 23 doses, and this was 72 hours. And you have to give it every 3 hours. Now, sometimes in the night time, you can go 4 hours because you have an hour grace period. It just depends on what your practitioner advises you to do, what you feel comfortable with. If you think that you need the little bit of extra sleep, then do it. I'm going to tell you this is not an easy treatment. You will adjust, but, waking up every 3 hours in the middle of the night to give your child medication, not medication, but supplements, is not super easy. But like I said, you will adjust, and you will learn ways to make it easier. You will learn tricks and tips to make it so much easier. I don't think it ever really gets any easier because when we are around, I am so exhausted having to wake up every 3 hours and give her this. But now I just take it in a little cooler bag because it has to be refrigerated. And I take it in a little cooler bag, and I have her little dropper ready, and we just do it. I set 2 alarms. That way, like, if I have to give one at 3 a.m., I'll set one for 3 a.m. and then 3:05 in case I sleep through the first alarm. And there are lots of rules, like if you miss a dose, like I said, an hour grace period or like a 30-minute grace period, depending on the time. And then if they spit it out or they puke it up, you have to stop round. If you do the dose wrong, you have to stop that round. And then usually after we stop round, like after round ends, you will give charcoal 3 hours after, just to bind all the metals that were pulled. That way that they don't redistribute back into the blood and go back up to the brain. Because, you know, you can have some free radicals if you don't bind them with charcoal or another type of binder, just because it's like an insurance policy. Sorry, it's like an insurance policy. So you don't have to do that. It's just like, it might make you feel safer. I think it's safer, just to kind of, you know, deplete the risk of those metals redistributing. And then I think that covers the basics of chelation. And there's so much more to it, but I'm not going to go into those details because I've kind of just explained the basics. And so I want to tell you guys where to start. The first thing you need to do, and you don't have to do this under the guidance of a practitioner. If you do your own research enough and you feel confident enough to do it, by all means, you know, that's you. But I 100% recommend that you have the guidance of a good practitioner, just because you will feel a lot more confident and safe in the treatment you're doing on your child. I know it's scary to try something new and to try something that is not popular among the medical community, and something that has been questioned for so many years. But you guys, the rise in autism is ridiculous. I think it's like 1 in 35 now, but in 2035, which is in 10 years, it's going to be, or 2032, sorry, my bad. In 10 years, it is going to be 1 in 2 of all children born. If these rates go the way they're going, that's half of children born in 2032 will be diagnosed with autism, and that will be a future generation. Half of that future generation having autism. And that's scary, guys. No one can sit here and tell me, like, that genes, you know, if that were a gene thing, I mean, it's not like it's going to multiply and grow like that. And I also want to say, we had genetic testing done on Amelia, like a full panel, and everything came back completely normal. There were no mutations, depletions, no extra missing chromosomes, nothing that put her at higher risk for autism. And that's the thing with genes, is a lot of times, a lot of our children have the MTHFR gene mutation, or just like other gene mutations that are said to put a child at higher risk for autism. But that's exactly what it does. It puts them at a higher risk. It does not cause the autism. And there is not a single gene that causes autism. So I want you guys to know that. Everyone thinks that for some reason autism is genetic and there's a gene for it and the dad carries the gene and passes it on to the kid. That is absolutely not how it goes. You can Google if there's a gene for autism. It will tell you there is not. But there's lots of funding being put from the CDC and the government into genetics to try to find a gene that's not gonna magically appear. But sometimes genetics can play a part. So when a child, like say, has the MTHFR gene mutation, and that's a very common one, a lot of our children have it. My children, Amelia does not have it. I suspect Jenny might have it, but I'm not worried about it because I know how to prevent autism now. But if your child has the MTHFR, and this is just an example, it's kind of like, it works, this is what our genetic specialist told us, it works kind of like a light switch. So the light switch is turned off. They have that gene that puts them at a higher risk, only if they are exposed to an environmental factor that turns that light switch on, causing a regression. So this gene mutation is turned off like the light switch, and then you have an environmental factor come in, such as a vaccine, such as around multiple rounds of antibiotics, or an overload of toxins that has really hit your child's body. And then that light switch flips on, and then bam, you have a child who's regressed. And then you will go to see a geneticist, and they will say, okay, it's this MTHFR gene. It put him at higher risk, and then you had an environmental factor come in to work with that gene and cause the autism. And so your child can have a gene mutation. That's fine. That doesn't mean your child's going to have autism just because they have a gene mutation that puts them at higher risk for autism. Actually, let me rephrase that. The MTHFR puts your child at higher risk for a vaccine injury that we call autism. And in my opinion, autism is just gut and brain inflammation. Because once we heal that gut and brain inflammation, our children are no longer autistic. And so, I mean, you can take it how you want it. It's just what it is. And so, the first step you need to take, if you're going to do this right, and is to book an appointment with a biomedical physician or a really good holistic health practitioner. Of course, I'm going to recommend Becky because she is so good, guys. And out of everyone we've ever seen, Becky is the best. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So Becky, had 2 children who she recovered from autism. And I'm going to link her son Nolan's story below. Because this story will probably do it for you. But she did chelation with him and he recovered. And it will just show the progress through chelation with her son. And then I think she also has a video for her other son as well. And Becky also has, since she's been through this with her own children, she knows the expenses that goes into it and the hard work. So she tries to make everything as easy and as inexpensive as she possibly can. And guys, when I tell you she's the best support, she really is. She is there anytime to help you if you have concerns or you're scared. And I mean, she really is so intelligent. I have never, out of all the biomedical physicians we have seen, and Becky is a holistic health practitioner. So she had less schooling than the actual biomedical physicians, but she is the most intelligent out of all of them that we have seen. And she has experience because she worked with a biomedical physician in Vegas. And, she recovered her sons on her own without help from a biomedical physician. She did her research and she had to do it all on her own. And she did so great, And she's just so intelligent. She's also a certified master herbalist. So she knows all the right herbs to give for different issues. And I mean, she's had experience with every single treatment because she's tried them all. And so she has years of experience and she has did this with her own children. So I don't think that there could be anyone better to help you. So I'm going to recommend Becky Davila. And her website is asdhealthcoach.com. And I'm going to leave that below in the comments as well. And then some other practitioners, and I'm not some other practitioners that, we have seen or heard of are Dr. Jerry Cartsinell in Orlando, Florida. And he is with, what's his center called? I can't remember what his center is called. You'll just have to type in Dr. Jerry Cartsinell in Orlando, Florida, and you could book an appointment. Or you can see Dr. Nick Gozian in Vegas. That is where Becky lives, and that is the physician who Becky worked for so many years. But I just want to say this. If you want this to be on a personal level, I would go with Becky just because she really cares about her patients. And it's really personal to her because she has a child with autism. Actually, all of these doctors that I'm talking about have children with autism. But Becky is really makes it personal, and she's just such a great support, guys. And you would love her from the very beginning. And you would just see what I'm talking about. But anyways, that's the first step you need to take. Book with a biomedical physician. They will run tests, and everything is passed by you before it's done, because obviously you're going to pay out of pocket for it. But like I said, Becky will try to make it as cheap as possible. They will run tests like stool samples and metal test to test the metals in the brain, and they will kind of look at mitochondria and mold and yeast and all of those things. And there are endless treatments in the biomedical world. There's C's homeopathy, there's chelation, there's gut reset, there's the Nemechek protocol. I mean, there's so many things that can be done. And Becky is familiar with all of those. And I'm sorry, Becky, because you might get a lot of messages or a lot of appointments, but, well, I mean, it's a good thing, but, so yeah, I think I've covered the basics, and that's all I meant to cover with this video. And I think maybe some people were expecting a lot more detail, but like I said, okay, one of my kids are waking up. Like I said, I just don't have the time to go into that. And every child's treatment will be different and based on their age and weight and everything. So you need to book with a practitioner. You know, the tests show for themselves, and then Amelia's ability to talk now and her behavior-wise and stuff. It's all just shows and it's proof. But I'm going to leave a bunch of articles and charts and videos and books that I recommend. And once you guys go through all of that and kind of see and read everything, it will explain all the detail that you will need. And you will probably, like, 100% be convinced, because all of these things were so very convincing. And they just, it's like 2 + 2 = 4. It's just so, it makes sense on a science level. These are from actual medical doctors who wrote these books. And so just do your research. Go join the group Health and Hope for Autism, and read the books. The books is like the best thing. Watch the videos, everything I post, and then you can take it from there. You can message Becky, or you can do more research. I will try to answer questions if I can, but you guys, I can't answer everyone's questions when I have like 1,000 messages coming in, because, you know, I have 2 kids to take care of by myself. So yeah, if anyone has a question that maybe I didn't cover here, ask it in the comments. That way I can reply there so everyone else will see it. I don't recommend that you message me asking for like dosage and how to actually do chelation for your child, because chelation might not be the answer for your child. There may be another treatment, and like you need to have testing and stuff done. So reach out to Becky. Reach out to me if you need support or more resources, because I will do my best to be there for you guys. Like I said, I can't promise like a whole lot, but I will do my best. So yeah.